Hello and welcome to Wilson's Barbecue. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how I like to cook brisket. So I know I've done quite a few brisket videos, but I wanted to pull together one that kind of captures everything from start to finish. So the purpose of this video really is to bring all of that information that I've already put out there and some things that maybe I haven't talked about, some things that I've learned into one video to show you exactly how I cook brisket. So we're starting off today with a Creekstone Farms Packer cut brisket. It's a USDA prime. It's my preferred cut and my preferred grade because I like the amount of intramuscular fat and connective tissue that the primes have, and Creekstone Farms are known for their quality. So the first thing that we need to do is trim this brisket up. I've done a video on this very recently, so if you haven't seen that, click the link above and go and watch that video. That goes into great detail about how I trim my briskets and shows you exactly how I do it. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but essentially what I've done is cut the fat cap down to around 1/2 centimetre or so all across the top, taken some of that decal fat out from underneath, rounded off the edges to make sure that nothing's going to burn, and that's pretty much it. The important thing for me when it comes to trimming, and I've said this in a previous video, is the amount of fat that you leave on top of the brisket. In my personal opinion, you need to leave some level of fat across the top because that helps you obtain a really nice bark, the kind of bark that we're all looking for. I've seen people say that you can remove all of the fat off the point area because there's plenty of fat inside the actual point muscle to be able to keep it moist. But for me, in order to get a really consistent black glossy bark, you need to leave that fat cap on there. That's just my opinion, but that's what I think yields the best looking brisket at the end. Also, if you remove the fat entirely, you're going to lose out on that really nice rendered, juicy, buttery fat that comes with a slice of point end brisket. The other key thing here is airflow. So you want to make sure that there are no dips and no high points to make sure that the air can flow over the top of the brisket nice and evenly, and again, get that nice consistent dark bark. The next thing we're going to do is season it. You may already know that I like to use 50/50 salt and pepper. I'm using the Good Rub Texas AF rub because that is perfect for me. I worked in collaboration with Good Rub to pull this rub together, and for me it's the perfect Texas style brisket rub. You can use kosher salt and 16 mesh black pepper. It's essentially the two components in the Texas AF rub. You can add in a few more parts black pepper if you like it on the more peppery side. That will also help to give a darker bark. A lot of places in Texas do that too. Louis Mueller uses 9 parts pepper to 1 part salt. So switch it up however you want it. For me, 50/50 pepper and salt. So we're bringing the offset pit up to temperature now. I'm going to be running at about 250 to 275 Fahrenheit or 120 to 135 Celsius. Again, I've said this before, for me, you need to be running at those kind of temperatures if you want to render the fat well. Some people like to cook at 225. For me, I think that's inefficient, unnecessary, and doesn't render the fat quite as well. So in my opinion, stick to 250 to 275 and I think that you're going to get a better outcome. Of course, you can cook your brisket however you want. This is just my opinion. So we're running with white oak today. I've got a few post oak splits from Pro Smoke Barbecue, but I'm mostly going to be using white English oak. So the pit's up to temperature. We're just going to put this on with the point facing the fire, shut it down, and we're probably not going to do much else other than manage these temperatures and try and stay on average about 260 the entire time, and we'll come back in about 3 hours and just check where we are. Right, so this has been on for about 3 hours. We're going to give it a little spot check, make sure that there are no areas that are burning, particularly on the point end toward the fire, but all we're going to do is spritz it with apple cider vinegar and water, 50/50 mix, just to stop those burning areas, but we're not going to soak the entire thing in this spray because what we want is for that fat to render down, and that fat rendering will keep the brisket surface moist. So the fat's not rendering just yet, it's only been on 3 hours, so what we're going to do is spritz the very end there to make sure we're not burning, and any ridges, and also any areas of pure meat. So I'm not too worried about this top side, which is covered in fat, just the bits that look like they might dry out, or any areas that don't have any fat on them to keep them moist. We're also going to give this a bit of a tip as well, because it's starting to pull juices on the top. So it's looking good. We'll check this again in about an hour, 2 hours. So we're in hour 4 of this cook, running at about 260. We've been there for the 4 hours that we've been cooking. We're just gonna have a little look, see how we're getting on. So we've got a nice bark forming. Gonna give it a little bit of a spritz just on that end there, stop it from drying out too much and the crust from burning. A little bit of a spritz just on the meat. Overall, it's looking good. So we are 6 hours into this cook. The bark is looking really nice. I'm happy with the colour. What I've been looking for is this fat to start rendering, and it has back here. It's really nice, it's rendered. You can see it's kind of sticky, and you can feel maybe here, and see that it kind of a bit crunchy, soft. Here it's still squidgy, so I'd like this to render out, but I'm a bit concerned that this is going to go a bit too far. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to wrap right now. As I say, I prefer this to have rendered out, and what I'm looking for is a nice colour, but mostly this kind of bark that when you push it, it feels very soft. This is not the kind of rendered fat I'm looking for. This is kind of spongy. So let's take it inside and wrap it up. So this is what the bark looks like just before it gets wrapped. We've got a little streak here. This is where the fat pooled. I did tip it plenty of times, but there was a kink in the fat. It pulled up too much, couldn't save it, so we just have to work with it. So as I say, I'm looking for that rendered surface fat. I'm looking for the colour, and we're pretty much there on it, I think. I'd probably like to have kept it going for another hour or so to try and render some of this fat out, but I think I'm gonna push this too far, so let's get it wrapped. So this is going to go into the oven. The reason why I put it into the oven is because it's consistent in temperature. I'm not going to waste any more money on wood. It means that I can go and get a shower, tidy up, and just kind of let it cook. There's absolutely no need for it to be on the smoker now, in my opinion. It's not going to take on any more smoke. So let's get it into the oven at about 260, and we'll check on it in about an hour to 2 hours, see how it's getting on. The brisket's been in for about 2 hours in the oven, so I'm going to take it out, check to see if it's feeling nice and tender, probe it as well to make sure that I can test the internal tenderness right in the middle of that flat. So I'm going to get it out of the oven now and we'll see how it looks. So, not feeling quite there yet. I think we're nearly there, just not quite. I'm just going to probe it as well. It's definitely not probing tender. I'd say it's probably got another hour or so on it. We're going to put it back into the oven, check on it again in about an hour. So the brisket has been in the oven for 3 hours now, so that's 9 hours overall. I've been checking it with my Thermopen just to check the tenderness of the flat, and I've just checked it and it's feeling pretty soft. So let's have a proper look at this, a proper feel, and discuss what we're looking for. So here it is, it's come out the oven. As I say, it was feeling pretty soft with my Thermopen, and I can feel that it's got a nice jiggle to it. Not jiggle, but maybe just it's nice and soft. The flat is nice and pliable, so I'm pretty confident that we're ready to go with this. So I'm just gonna check it again, probing it with my Thermopen, and very little resistance all the way through the flat. And for those keeping score, the internal temperature was around 207, a little bit higher in some places, lower in the others. But I'm not too fussed about that. I'm more concerned about how pliable and how soft and how tender it feels. So every well-cooked piece of meat needs a rest. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. In one of my previous videos, I said that I like to rest in a cooler and I like to rest for about 4 hours. And that's definitely true. And you can rest it in a cooler for 4 hours. What I didn't talk about in that video was the carryover heat. So carryover heat is essentially the residual heat that is within the brisket, and that residual heat can continue to cook the brisket. So although we've taken it out now and it was reading 207 Fahrenheit, if I put it straight into a cooler, that residue heat could carry over and maybe overcook the brisket. So you can put it in a cooler or into an auto sham or a Cambro or something, some kind of holding unit. But what I'd recommend is that you wait for the brisket to stop cooking. And you can do that by just putting a probe in it, and once the temperature stops climbing and starts to come down a couple of degrees, stick it into a cooler, a holding unit, and rest it for as long as you want. What I'm gonna do, and what you can do, and I think is perfectly acceptable, is to just rest it on the side. And that's what I'm gonna do today. And I wanna serve this brisket at around 145 to 150 Fahrenheit, and I'm gonna monitor the internal temperature by putting my probe into the brisket and just watching it. When it gets to around 150, I know it's pretty much ready to slice and serve. 204, 205. Just gonna monitor that now. Once it hits 150, probably gonna serve it. Right, so this has been resting for about 2 hours. It's at around 145 internal temperature. So let's slice into it and see how we did. I'm hoping that the bark hasn't come off too much on that flat, which I showed you earlier, but I'm anticipating that it probably has. There we go. So it's looking pretty good. We've got a nice bark, nice wobble, which is always good. Right, so what we'll do is take a little bit off that flat end, take a couple of slices, and then we'll get into that point. So this is always the end that you're a bit worried about drying out. You can see we've got nice fat rendering, some nice bark. Slice. So you can see that it hangs under its own weight and just pulls apart nice and easy. That is so good. The first thing you get is the butteriness from the rendered fat. So I think I'm actually happy with the amount of fat I left on that. Salty, peppery, smoky, perfect. Let's see how we did in there. I'm gonna cut that decal fat just off, just get rid of it because it's mostly fat. Well rendered, good amount of bark. So I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. You can see that the flat underneath is nicely still moist. The point, some of that intramuscular fat is kind of rendered away. I quite like it when it's nice and soft like this. But I also really enjoy it when you can still see the fat between the muscle fibers. Either way, that's moist, it's tender, I'm really happy with it. So thank you very much for watching. That was my step-by-step on how to cook a brisket. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel, it really helps me out. Come find me on Instagram and say hello, I'd really appreciate it. And check back in the next couple of weeks for another video.